Okay, class, show of hands. How many of you has zoned out during a conversation? Good, good. Has anyone ever procrastinated on chores or homework until someone got mad at you? Interesting. Have any of you ever spent 6 hours watching TV and suddenly it's dark outside? That's what I thought. Now, for all the marbles. Do any of you do these things every day? To quote Jughead Jones, I'm weird. I'm a weirdo. On a regular basis, I do things that I can't really explain to people. Sometimes I laugh at the jokes my brain tells me, and then everyone standing nearby looks at me like I'm crazy. Sometimes I drop everything I'm doing and stare at a wall for 20 minutes while my brain makes dial-up sounds. To summarize, I'm a walking contradiction. I'm driven but lazy, smart but stupid, clever but clumsy, social but awkward, and energetic but always tired. And it sucks. But honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way. I have ADHD. You've probably heard of it, most likely in a classroom setting, at the doctor's office, or while someone is yelling at you. And if you came looking for this video, there's a decent chance you have it too. But a lot of people either don't understand it or pretend it doesn't exist at all. So I decided to make this video to see if I could help, set the record straight. Let's start with the basics. First things first, ADHD is a bad name. It stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. But the reality of the situation is that people with ADHD don't actually have a deficit of attention, we just struggle with regulating where it goes. This is all due to a chemical called dopamine, which gives humans positive chemical responses for doing things.
Did somebody pay the electric bill? Did Tommy pay the electric bill? Good boy.
On average, ADHD brains distribute less dopamine for completing less appealing tasks, which, in a nutshell, means most things are impossibly agonizingly boring. Homework? Can't do it. Laundry? Haven't done it in a month. Taxes? The IRS is hunting me as we speak. So now that you more or less understand the science behind this beautiful dumpster fire in my skull, let's get a little more personal. It was 2006. Crazy by Gnarls Barkley was on the radio. Bionicles were everywhere. I was in the first grade, and things were simple. An average day looked a little something like this. I showed up to school at 8 a.m., drew robots on my desk until recess, played in the sandbox until everyone else went back inside for lunch, and then sometimes I'd get distracted by the clouds and forget to feed myself. At 2 p.m., I'd go home and spend the remainder of the day avoiding my homework. Needless to say, a few of my teachers were confused. I was a bright kid and a fast reader, but I was also what one of my teachers called a problem child, and what the general public would call a paste-eating basket case. Okay, just to clarify, I never actually ate paste, but I did get lost in daydreams in class, lose my homework on a routine basis, and draw on every piece of paper I was handed. One time, I actually had a teacher turn my desk backwards just so I couldn't make it any messier. This pattern continued for a couple years, and eventually my parents decided it was time to see a doctor. The doctor gave me a list of questions like, do you often find yourself getting lost in thought and forgetting important details? And do you zone out during conversations with other people and forget what you were talking about? I found myself circling yes on every question, and I remember thinking this meant something was wrong with me. And at least for a while, the adults around me, except my parents, reinforced that idea. I was prescribed 20 milligrams of Concerta, and I'll never forget that first pill. I couldn't swallow pills, so my mom would ground them up and put them in chocolate pudding. I was really young, and she didn't tell me what this specific pill was for, just so she could be sure it was doing its job. I went about my day as usual, drawing on things, avoiding anything that resembled a math problem, until finally, it hit me. All the TV static that was normally playing on a loop in my head just stopped. Whenever we talk about it, my mom always tells me how excited I was. The first thing I said to her was, "Mom, my brain is working." For the first few days, things in school were looking up. But looks can be deceiving. Every afternoon, the drugs would wear off. I thought everyone at school was out to get me. I thought my teachers hated me. I went home, my heart pounding, screamed into pillows, threw things, and finally just fell asleep. More than anything, though, I felt as if the pills just pushed away the things I liked most about myself. I wanted to quit. My parents understood my fear, and they saw what the pills did to me, so they agreed. For years, I've been living under the assumption that ADHD made me defective, made me stupid, made me broken, so I blocked it out. I told myself I'd never touch those pills again. My backpack was a mess, I would lose track of homework on an almost weekly basis, and my teachers were perpetually angry with me. A year passed, and then another, and then 3, and 4, and 10. I struggled and stumbled, but by my senior year of high school, I was living a life I never dreamt I could. I got into my first pick college. I started a YouTube channel I was really proud of. The future was bright. I had no idea what the next year had in store. Turns out, freshman year of college was very possibly the worst year of my life. Not only was I managing my own schedule for the first time, I had to transition to being my own boss for my freelance work, which isn't easy when you're 18 years old and you just moved out of your parents' house. Things for me only got worse as a result. I could do this a month ago. Why can't I keep up? Am I stupid? My grades dipped. My YouTube channel stalled, and I felt completely hopeless. And on top of that, people all around me, even those who didn't have ADHD, were taking the same pills I was terrified of. Midterms rolled around, and I was experiencing a level of stress that I never had before. I was sitting in a study room, 2 paragraphs deep into a term paper, when a stranger walked in. Without so much as a hello, he just offered me Adderall. Brief PSA, prescription stimulant abuse is a huge problem on high school and college campuses. While they help people with ADHD, these drugs are amphetamines, and they have completely different effects on people without it. There are other far less stupid recreational drugs you can take, and selling or faking a prescription is dangerous and irresponsible. I'm not gonna lie to you though, despite all the circumstances that put them in front of me again, I really wanted those pills. It took every bit of willpower that I had left, but I refused. The next thing I knew, it was May. I made it through finals, but just by the skin of my teeth. I moved home for the summer, and as I was pulling the boxes out of my car, I couldn't help but feel defeated. After 10 years of struggling in a system that wasn't built for me, coping with blunt standardized tests, messy backpacks, and a college system that lacked the structure I needed to keep me sane, I realized that as much as I wanted to pretend I didn't, I needed help, and I had no idea where to turn. So I turned to the internet. For the first time, I started truly learning about how my brain works. And when I say learning, I mean my world was turned upside down. I found communities of people going through the same problems and expressing the same worries as I was. I learned that I'm not alone. None of us are alone. Even more than that, though, by reading the testimony of hundreds of other people with similar brains, I realized that ADHD isn't just the key factor in many of my flaws, it's also responsible for some of my best traits. This changed everything. Having ADHD didn't mean there was something wrong with me. And armed with all this new information and confidence, I was ready to build a lifestyle around how my brain actually works. I went back to the doctor and got a prescription for a different pill called Vyvanse, taken once daily in the morning. In the interest of keeping things brief, Vyvanse was almost as bad for me as Concerta had been. But this time, I didn't give up. I adapted. I tried running, meditating, bullet journaling, Pomodoro timers, 15 different phone alarms, and I made notes on what worked and what didn't. And then, I went back to my doctor. She gave me a script for 5 milligrams of Adderall and told me that I could regulate the dosage myself based on what felt right, or opt not to take it at all. The jury's still out on whether Adderall and I can coexist forever, but the future looks bright. Ultimately though, this summer's been a huge paradigm shift for me. I found that more than pills, more than planners, more than any homeopathic newt tongue somebody tries to sell you to cure you, the best treatment for an ADHD brain is understanding how it works. It took me more than 10 years to figure out, but I finally realized I wasn't afraid of pills. I was afraid of accepting that ADHD is a part of who I am. It's not something I can change, it's not something I can ignore, and it doesn't make me any better or worse of a person. Everyone's good at some things and bad at other things, and It just so happens that the things that I'm good and bad at are a little bit unconventional. And that's okay. All I can really do is live the best life I can with what I got. And once I actually did my research, I learned that what I got is a lot more than what I thought. Despite everything I've said so far about the challenges of living with ADHD, at its best, it's pretty great. ADHD often comes part and parcel with more physical energy, as well as high levels of creativity, passion, and nonlinear problem solving. Our brains are pretty chaotic, which makes people with ADHD really good at something that motivational posters call outside the box thinking, creating correlations where none exist, and looking at problems from unique angles. As a result, people with ADHD tend to be great at pitches, brainstorming, and coming up with original ideas. We also have a low-key superpower called hyperfocus. Because we're usually short on dopamine, whenever we get excited about something for real, we're floored. This gives us the ability to work for abnormally long periods of time on one thing without getting distracted. That's why I can spend 12 straight hours working on a 30-second video without eating or sleeping or leaving my chair, but I'll also forget to turn off the oven. The coolest part is, with a little bit of training, we can hyperfocus on anything we want, including the boring stuff. According to research done by HowToADHD's Jessica McCabe, we're 3 times more likely than normal people to start our own businesses. As a result, many famous artists, actors, comedians, and entrepreneurs were either diagnosed or are heavily suspected to have ADHD. Among them are people like Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Robin Williams, Jim Carrey, and Albert Einstein. Try calling it a disorder now. We also tend to be sincere, friendly, easygoing people. Speaking personally, I have a god-awful poker face. Because I need so much stimulation for something to grab my attention, it's nearly impossible for me to feign interest in something. So when you have my attention, it's because I genuinely care about what you're saying. There are countless other little joys to living with ADHD that I want to talk about more in the next video. But in the interest of keeping this script short, I'm going to cut to the key takeaways. I know many of you watching this may have ADHD yourselves, and there's a lot I want to say to you. I know I have a tendency to ramble, so I'm going to do my best to keep it brief. First of all, the label ADHD exists for the benefit of other people, not for you. Deviating from the norm is not a bad thing. You're just conditioned to believe that it is. You are not clumsy, lazy, stupid, or any of the negative labels people try to use to describe you. In fact, you're probably working 3 times as hard as everyone else. You are the only version of yourself, and nobody, not a bully, not a teacher, not a boss who fails to understand the way you function, can change that. Whenever you're having a rough day, which I know can be often, remember that you live in a world that isn't suited to the way your brain works. So play to your strengths. Do some digging on the methods other people use to take advantage of their ADHD. Mix and match until you find strategies that fit your unique brain like a glove. And depending on what works best, one of those strategies might be Adderall. It might be Vyvanse. It might be Concerta or Ritalin or a non-stimulant if you're feeling crazy. What I'm trying to get across is that it takes a lot of courage to seek help, and there's nothing, absolutely nothing wrong with using medication. Just because I had a bad experience with the first few stimulants doesn't mean they're bad as a whole. They're merely a tool you can choose whether or not to use. They don't make you weak, they don't make you stupid, and they don't give you any unfair advantage. If you're the parent, boss, teacher, friend, or coworker of somebody with ADHD, give yourself a pat on the back. We know it can be a lot to deal with, but give us a pat on the back sometimes too. There are a lot of things that we're good at, but there's also a lot of things that we're bad at. Sometimes all we need is a little bit of encouragement. After everything that I've learned and everything that I've endured as a result of my atypical brain, there's one thing I know for certain. Everyone's different. There's no such thing as normal. There's no such thing as neurotypical. There is no such thing as perfectly functional. And after all these years, I'm finally ready to take ownership of something that a bad teacher once called me. I'm a problem child. And all my other problem children out there, you're not alone. There are way more of us than you realize. And we're going to change the world. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. If you want to share your ADHD stories, tweet them at me with Danny Donovan's hashtag NeurodiverseSquad. My friend Reedflower also uploaded an ADHD video today, which I highly recommend checking out. One more thing before I go, though.